Welcome to Managing Snapshots using SQL Server Management Studio and Pure Storage extension. My name is Robert Quimby, and I'm the Senior Solutions Architect for Microsoft Solutions.
I'm Barks, Technical Director, Product and Solutions at Pure, managing Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP.
And a little bit later on, we'll introduce Kurt Havman from Scimitar. Thank you. So our session agenda is we're going to go over some challenges that SQL Server DBAs are faced with. We'll talk about snapshots and scale out. We'll talk about our SQL Server Management Studio extension. We've got an interview coming up with Scimitar, and then we're going to dive deeper.
So what are the challenges with SQL servers? Like Q was saying, what are DBAs really kind of facing today? So when you start to think about this, and this really kind of applies to any particular database, but one of the things is, as you're running these databases, obviously you're being impacted by rising data volumes. So everything pretty much nowadays is being collected and then also scaled out to do reporting and testing, whether it be on premises or in the cloud. And that's really kind of one of the significant impacts that's happening. And really, it's all about how do DBAs manage that. How do I be able to take snapshots, or how do I be able to manage the data volume growth that they're seeing when it comes to managing? In this case, we're talking about SQL Server. So one of the other things that's impactful is consistency. And what I mean by that is consistent performance and knowing that there's not going to be any downtime. And one of the things about the flash array is, we do have consistent performance, consistent bandwidth and IOPS. So that way, DBAs don't necessarily have to be worried about the performance that, they are expecting. So, with the consistency that we provide, it's, as we kind of say, DBAs aren't necessarily having to look at their systems on the weekends, and they kind of get that time back. And the other thing is that if they do want to manage that and they do want to view into that, they don't necessarily have to be sitting at their desktop or being in the office to do that. We have what's called a Pure One. And there is a phone app for that. So that way, you can even monitor just directly on your phone. So the second challenge that is there is, how do I effectively scale out my databases? In the past, it would really kind of be a copy operation. You take a backup and you go ahead and copy that somewhere. And then you can attach that database, by restoring that backup and then connecting it to however many hosts that you want, to be able to do reporting, data warehousing kind of stuff. And that was a long, drawn-out process.
And a lot of space, right? You had to have a place to fit the backup. You had to then restore it somewhere. Now you're talking about, I need 7, 8, 10, 20 copies of the database. I need a lot more storage.
Yeah, right. And I mean, one of the benefits of using the flash array is being able to take snapshots. So we can instantaneously take a snapshot of a volume. And the impact of, as Q said, the size impact of having to have this huge allocation of space is, our snapshots are space efficient. So if I take a snapshot or 10 snapshots, the only thing that you're going to see in those snapshots is a differential, because, we're completely pointer based. So, you're not impacted by that huge scale and growth of everything. The other thing about copy cloning that we provide is really kind of making your productivity a lot better. So, if you have a bunch of developers that need a copy of a database, take a snap, attach it to their host, and then they're off and running by, attaching that database to SQL Server, and not really kind of having to worry about waiting for a backup, waiting for a copy of that database, which, in some cases, that could take, hours and hours and hours.
Definitely.
So, the other thing is, we don't simply live in an on-premises world anymore. Everything, you have to think about it as hybrid. Mm-hmm. So, and that does add complexity in terms of how do I manage my data on premises? How do I get my data in the cloud? And then if I put it in the cloud and I want to use that as my production, the problem is, how do I get my data back on premises if that's where all my developers are working, right? So,
Right.
one of the things about the FlashArray is we provide replication support. So now you know that if you're in a hybrid environment, you can kind of go backwards and forwards, bidirectionally with your data. The other thing about, having a hybrid environment is, DBAs like to automate stuff. So, because Pure has an API first driven strategy, everything in the FlashArray that you can do in the GUI has an endpoint. So it has a REST API endpoint. And what we've done is, and we're going to do another session on what's called Cloud Block Store for Azure. And there is no difference in experience. So if you write a script on the FlashArray on premises, you can take that same script and actually run it in Cloud Block Store for Azure without really any modification. You might need to modify some database names or something like that, but that's extremely low impact.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about writing different scripting, and changing things, which basically impacts, your resources, right? So
Definitely.
So the other thing, as we were just kind of talking about with regards to snapshots. So on the FlashArray, we provide two different types of snapshots. Natively in the array, we have crash consistent snapshots. So that means that I can rapidly take a snap of a volume, and it's going to be guaranteed to be crash consistent. So when it comes to SQL Server, that means that I can snapshot that database, and then I can go into SQL Server Management Studio and use the attach database method to bring that database in from that particular snapshot. Now, the other kind of cool thing that we provide in terms of crash consistence is you have the ability to overwrite a volume.
Right.
So as I take a snapshot for a developer, now what they can do is they can take that snapshot and then overwrite an existing volume so that now they get the latest and greatest of everything. But if they wanted to revert back to the previous snapshot, they could overwrite that volume again with the previous snapshot. So, and in this case, like I said, crash consistencies are native to the FlashArray. So there's no software that you have to install on a host, which is quite nice because you don't have to deploy additional software on, if you have 1,000 different servers, that's a really kind of nice advantage of using crash consistent snaps. So
definitely. And Barks, each volume or snapshot is its own entity with no caveats. So like you were saying in your example, if they wanted to, rather than revert back, they could spin up additional volumes and overwrite them with older or newer snapshots and have a side-by-side, or maybe they, like you were saying, scale out. Maybe they want 50 more copies of that snapshot exposed in dev and test, for instance, and that could be trivially done.
Yeah, exactly. And you actually bring up a good point is our snapshots are immutable. So
Right.
that means if I took 100 snapshots and I deleted snap 40 and snap 70, every other snapshot's not affected.
Yep.
So, in some of the competitors, that actually does significantly affect that snapshot chain. So, like you said, everything in the FlashArray is its own entity, and then you can kind of go ahead and use them how you want, be able to prune them, anything that you kind of want in terms of, getting rid of different snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everything that crash consistent snapshots do, it's all working at the volume level. So if you create volume A and you take a snap, it's just working against that particular volume. So it's not, having any effect across all these other volumes that you might be managing. One of the things, as we'll talk about app consistent in just a second, is the fact that, with crash consistent snaps, there's no quiescing. So you don't have to, stop that database in terms of using something like the volume shadow copy service. So, it's an immediate snap, and you could pretty much take a snap every second if you wanted to, and you're not having to quiesce anything in terms of the crash consistent snapshots, against the system itself. And all the crash consistent snaps are all redirect on write. So, that's actually another nice benefit in terms of being able to leverage those snaps. So now in comparison, we also support application consistent snapshots.
Right.
So if you're very concerned about, making sure that you have full consistency in that database, you'd essentially use our VSS provider. So we have a hardware provider. And then what we'll talk about a little bit later on is we have a requester. So, in VSS, it's all built on requester, writer, provider. So we provide, the two endpoints, and then that writer service is provided, in this case, SQL Server, that's actually provided by Microsoft. Now, one of the difference between crash and app consistent is you have to install additional software on a host to support application consistency. Like I said, we'll talk about our SQL Server Management Studio extension, and we've done something, that's extremely beneficial to DBAs. Typically you'd have to go to a host, install VSS, go to the next host, go to the next host. Mm-hmm. What we've done is give you the ability to have one centralized management tool, meaning SSMS, and we deploy all the software automatically to all those particular hosts. So you're not touching a whole bunch of different hosts and manually have to perform some of those operations of installing. Another difference between crash and app is the fact that you are quiescing IO. So that writer service is making the decision when it's most effective to stop the database and be able to hand off to the hardware provider to take that instantaneous snap. So, when we take a snap using the hardware provider, we're also taking a snap just like we are from a crash consistent. So it's an instantaneous snap. Again, we're still using redirect on write. Now, the other thing about app consistency is we have the ability to support point in time. So that means that you can bring transaction logs back into the system and be able to use those for a recovery perspective. Crash consistent, you're using attached database. So you're attaching the database, directly from that snapshot volume created. So that's, those are the difference between the two types of snapshots that we're supporting.
Definitely.
So, as we, kind of mentioned in here, we talked about developers quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And, I had mentioned being able to take on-premises data and then pushing that up into Azure if you wanted to. And, it's fully bi-directional. So, we support, when it comes to Azure, having express route. And everything in this case, because you're going from on-premises across the wire into Azure, we would look at focusing on supporting our asynchronous replication. So all you're doing is setting up an async relationship with Cloud Block Store, and then essentially you are using async replication to get your data from on-premises up into Azure. So once again, we're taking benefits of all of the capabilities of our replication support, to get that data up there extremely effectively. And this is all flowing across, virtual networks and everything else that you would typically, configure when you're going from an on-premises implementation into Azure itself. So, and this is, like I said, it's all bi-directional. So once you put data up into Azure and you want to get it back on premises, it's the same thing. Replication support, you're just going in the reverse direction. So I'd already mentioned our support for SQL Server Management Studio. So we've built an extension that is part of Management Studio. So you're not going out and firing up another application. You actually have full integrated support. So, the tool that DBAs live in with SQL Server is Management Studio. So we're giving that single pane of glass experience. And, like I mentioned, the VSS framework. So this is our requester support. So, we have a direct menu item that you use. It says Pure Storage, and you go in there, do your configurations. And this is fully supporting application consistency. So this is using, like I said, the hardware provider to take snapshots. And then we give you the ability to be able to back up and restore those particular snapshots using point-in-time recoverability if that's what you want it to do as well. And test dev refresh, that's really, one of the most popular things in terms of being able to have developers, continue to make progress on development, be able to use data that, from multiple snapshots if they want to see differences, in those particular databases themselves. So, in terms of the types of backups that we support, so there's full and copy only. So this is giving you also the ability to restore either to a local SQL Server database, or you can use it against remote SQL Server instances. Again, single pane of glass, and then you can do restores to local or be able to use the features of the extension and, restore this to a remote SQL Server instance with ever having to go to that particular instance itself.
We're given a lot of opportunity here to not only do like VSS backup and restore, but with part of the test and dev refresh, etc., we can take all of these snapshots and mount them locally, remote, etc. And so we can have these workflows where, we have yesterday's snapshot, we take a new one, we dismount yesterday's, mount the new one, and you're refreshed in, under a minute. And that is, some pretty compelling workflows to have all through SSMS.
Yeah, precisely. And one of the things that also, kind of supports what you just said is you don't have to do this just in the SSMS GUI. So, right. The way that we've implemented this is, there's the functionality in SSMS, but all of the operations that we're doing are really using our PowerShell module. So we have a backup SDK that's part of the extension. So you can go ahead, that same workflow scenario that Q just mentioned, you can have that thing completely automated. So run it on a schedule, when you're coming back in the next day that you've actually already refreshed, whatever instance that you might be doing. And in terms of the support for deployment, so you can use this against physical servers, you can use this against physical RDMs, and then, you can also use this against mount points.
And in the cloud, right, you're going to use iSCSI in the guest, which of course you could do with Hyper-V or VMware as well.
Yeah, precisely. So now let's take a look at a demonstration of the extension. So as you can see here, we've got our Pure Storage menu item that's in the main toolbar. So, the demonstration that we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new table. And we're going to take snapshots of this and be able to recover this. So simple database table. We go ahead and save that database table. Now you can see we've got two new tables in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to restore it from a prod instance into the dev test instance. And what we're doing right now is, as I mentioned, everything's through the PowerShell backup SDK. So we just saw there that we can, view the tables that we just created. Yep. Now what we're doing is we're taking a snapshot of that production database. And one of the things that we do is we check all the version information to make sure you have all the current software on that particular host. So now we're automating taking the database offline, and then we're dismounting the snapshot. Once again, we're checking the version information that making sure you have everything. Then we dismount from the P drive, and now we're mounting that snapshot to DB production. We unmounted it, and just like Q had mentioned previously, that particular workflow is now we go ahead and mount that. Now, if I go refresh that database, now you can see I have those two new tables. So that's pretty much how easy it is using the PowerShell backup SDK to automate all of this.
Definitely. And when we're checking for those versions, Barks, if we've upgraded to newer versions, we'll just push those to the appropriate SQL servers and on the fly. So it's kind of install once on your management console and forget about it. And then you
Yep.
upgrade your management console and we take care of it all. If you have
Yep.
500 SQL servers, you're not managing all the versions of the component.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was one of the things that we had mentioned earlier, right? As a challenge is
Yes.
being able to manage all these different instances and being able to scale out stuff. We make it pretty simple here using, and honestly, whether you wanted to do this with crash consistent with attach, or here you're using it with application consistent snapshot.
So now I'd like to introduce Kurt Havman from Scimitar. Kurt, how you doing?
Oh, good. How are you?
Very good. So we were hoping you could tell us a little bit about Scimitar and what you do for Scimitar.
Scimitar is a data processing company. We develop software for credit unions to allow them to run their business. We're a division of Jack Henry. Jack Henry does the same thing for your regional and local banks.
Awesome.
I work in the network hardware services department, and I am responsible for developing new products in and around infrastructure, including things like storage, disaster recovery, virtualization.
So now that we have you here today to talk with us, we're hoping you can describe a little bit of some of the challenges that you face and how you're able to leverage Pure as well as our SQL Server Management Studio extension to kind of, address some of these challenges.
Yeah, so credit unions have nightly processing to do. It's things like posting dividends as well as doing all of the regulatory and compliance things they need to do. And one of the biggest challenges is nightly processing is backups. Right. Every night a credit union has to take multiple backups, some for archival, some for reporting purposes. And 3 years ago, we decided to start looking for a new storage solution. And our challenge was the storage solution we were using was really not user-friendly. It wasn't taking advantage of the latest technology when it came to Flash, and just in general wasn't helping our overall operations. So after looking at several vendors, we chose Pure, and we chose Pure for a couple of reasons. One, their position on support and how they feel that support is critical matches perfectly with Scimitar.
Awesome.
It was designed from Flash for the ground up and designed to take advantage of the latest technology. And most importantly, the technological roadmap and the features that Pure had, especially in the world of their API, matched our plans for the future at Scimitar. So what we started doing last year was using the REST API integration to allow us to leverage snapshots for those nightly backups. In the past, backups for one client might take 45 minutes for a night. And now we've been able to get that number down to about 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that means that a credit union that used to spend 45 minutes just waiting for things to copy is now able to get back to finishing their nightly processing and then get back to serving its members as quickly as possible.
Wow, that's fantastic. And when you say API driven, this isn't something that you have administrators clicking and doing things every night, right? Once you set up the job, can you kind of describe that just a little bit in the automation?
Yeah, every night there is a predefined job file that runs all of your nightly processing. You don't want somebody to have to sit there and push buttons every night to make things run. So by using the API, we're actually able to integrate everything Pure needs to do into our application, which means it uses our application security, our user access, our reporting, our error handling, our paging and alerting. All of that is now built into our application. And credit unions don't need to learn new things. They don't have to give users access to a storage system. They just keep doing their job the same way they've always done it.
And that's wonderful from a security perspective as well, because if a particular user needs to be able to perform backup, they don't also need the ability to delete everything on the storage array.
Yes, they don't need any access to the storage array, which means audits from regulators is very easy. They don't have any access, and that's an easy check mark for an auditor.
So Kurt, can you tell us a little bit about how you're leveraging Microsoft SQL Server with our new backup SDK that's shipping in our SQL Server Management Studio extension to take application consistent snapshots on the Pure Flash array?
Yes, Scimitar is using Microsoft SQL as a database option for a while now, and we've been able to use the SDK to integrate backups and snapshots into Epicus. This means that credit unions don't have to learn something new when they migrate from one database to the other.
Awesome.
And most importantly, they maintain the same security and the same audit trail that they had before.
So Kurt, Pure Storage is always coming out with, new features and functionality. But one of the things that I've heard you talk about is the Pure customer support experience. So wondering if you could close with any comments on that.
Yes. I mean, Scimitar always wants to leverage the latest technology and the new features that Pure is offering. But at the end of the day, the goal of this solution is to provide the best possible support and the best possible solution for our customers. Mm-hmm. And technology helps us do that. But most importantly, the support that Pure offers our clients helps us do that. I've had many clients come to me and say they love Pure, and they love Pure because when they had a problem, Pure was able to take care of it, get it resolved quickly, and made their lives easier.
That's wonderful. Well, Barks, I know that we want to thank Kurt for his time, and we really appreciate you checking out Accelerate with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kurt. Really appreciate a lot of the things that you had to say.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And so, Barks, if folks want to dive deeper, we've got a couple other really good resources here. We have a demo here that you can watch on our extension for SQL Server, which is similar to what we showed off here. And so we also have the Pure Solutions for Microsoft, which is off of purestorage.com, where you can look at all of the technology that we're leveraging in the flash array for Microsoft solutions. And finally, we have a recent blog post, which is simplify the SQL Server data protection and cloning with the flash array SSMS extension. And so this is where we really kind of dive in a little bit more about the automation. So let's check those out.
Cool. I appreciate everyone's time listening to the session.
Thank you.
And be sure to check out our Cloud Block Store session for Azure, because we're going to be talking about SQL Server in that session as well.
Definitely.
Thanks again.
Thank you.